All right, welcome back, everybody, to another attempt at distinguishing good and bad science. I'm a little late on this podcast. I meant it to go with the post this morning. The post is the Great Global Warming, A.K.A. Climate Change, A.K.A. Climate Emergency, among others, post. But I was too busy and including it late. This is mainly a sort of a catch-up post or podcast for those new readers who don't recall the old days, the old global warming days. And you will have naturally noticed at the blog, if you've been following along, an increase in global warming posts, which of course they now call climate change. Now, I used to believe in global warming, the story of which I put in the article I wrote, How I Became a Renegade Scientist. That's linked on the blog. You can go and find that. I'm not going to repeat any of that kind of stuff here about my conversion to skepticism and the like. But I do want to emphasize certain other points of science from the old days that are going to arise, that are arising now and will arise in the future as they continue to push this next panic. Now, nobody can or should believe in climate change. And whenever you hear me say the word or the phrase climate change, always imagine that I'm giving you the air quotes or the scare quotes. The reason is simple. Global warming had a definite meaning. Climate change doesn't mean anything. Or rather, it means whatever each listener wants it to mean each time they hear it. It sort of functions like racism does, the word racism or racist does outside science. That global warming became climate change is one reason, but not the most important reason that I lost and why you should lose confidence in global warming. Let's discuss that just for a moment, and then I'll give you a little bit of a review of some of the old posts. Now, it's true that in the early days of climatology, a majority of scientists were concerned about global cooling and the looming ice age. This was, when I say majority of scientists, I mean a very small number of people because climatology wasn't really an independent field at that point. So it was a majority in a very small area. But it was exacerbated, this idea of a looming ice age, by the idea and fears of something called nuclear winter, if you remember that. I have an old post on that called The Horrible Predictions of Climate Change you can read. Now, global cooling had its brief, albeit modest fame, but the weather failed to cooperate. It got warmer, and then we had global warming, and I think everybody remembers that. But again, alas, the weather failed its alleged masters, and that's why we got this mysterious thing called climate change. Now, not just a consensus, but all scientists agree that the climate of the Earth has changed before, it's changing now, and that it will continue to change until the last Trump. The temperature, its geographic and altitudinal distributions, the oceans, precipitation, everything, none of it has remained constant. All of it is ever in flux. The processes of change are inexorable. It cannot be stopped. So it's always perplexing to hear demands to fight climate change. You may as well scream, battle gravity, or war against electromagnetism. You're going to achieve the exact same result. The objection will be that it is the human contributions to climate change that must be battled, that ought to be stopped or minimized. Well, they can't be stopped. It's an impossibility. Not unlikely, impossible. Not while people live. While people live, they're going to contribute to climate change. Contributions can be minimized, but only in the same sense that they can be stopped, which is to say we must eliminate people to stop or minimize human contributions to a changing climate. That's the only thing you can do to minimize it, is eliminate people. Any other argument about human contribution involves uncertain costs and benefits of amorphous actions, all of which rely on the quality of models and trust in politicians. And I have more about models in the review below. Meanwhile, the term climate change has become a cudgel. Any bad weather event was called climate change, and not just weather events, but really bad events of all kinds were and are being tied to climate change. Nothing good, though. Climate change is incapable of any good. It's purely bad. It's always frightening, something which must be avoided at all costs. Climate change thus serves as the same purpose as wily, unscrupulous evil gods did in pagan religions. This is why nobody should believe in climate change. It does not mean anything fixed. It does not describe something that can be stopped. Well, climate change, it's still around. That term is still around, but it's falling out of popularity a little bit. They tried out climate disruption, all kinds of these other apocalyptic terms as replacements, and they seem to have settled, at least for now, on climate crisis. There is no climate crisis. It's an absurd claim. It has no bearing in reality, none whatsoever. This brings up the term climate denier, because when you deny there's a climate crisis, they will call you a climate denier. My answer, whenever I'm confronted by this, is to say, yes, I deny there is a climate. This usually leaves the yeller perplexed because, well, the reason is simple. Because denying climate change has nothing to do with denying the climate changes, which, as I said, everybody accepts. It means only that you do not want the so-called solutions to the so-called crisis. Solutions the denier crier badly wants. I did a speech on this, some 7 or 8 years ago. I'd change a bit of it, minor things, but not the gist of it. I have a link to that speech that I gave at a conference on the blog, too. Now, remember, a small increase in global average temperature means nothing, and even less than nothing. In fact, it's beneficial, which is all that global warming promised us. If climate change is a threat, it is only because of those things that are affected by changing weather, and not the small average temperature increase. But those things affected by the weather are necessarily, this is a logical statement, they are necessarily less certain than changes in the weather, which are themselves uncertain. The claims of climate change married to bad things that are said will happen must therefore necessarily be less certain than climate change itself. And I have a lot of articles on this explaining it. I have why you don't have to worry about climate change, multiplication of uncertainties. I give examples of that in these currency model. I have an article that was a favorite of mine anyway, how to generate massive scientific overcertainty with these 4 simple tricks. I did a talk on this, another talk. This is a talk I did at the Royal Academy of Science in Madrid in 2008, and I think I did a very poor job then. I unnecessarily made things complex by introducing math, which is always a mistake when talking to a general audience. The idea was sound, but I think I carried it out poorly. I fixed that, I hope, in some of these newer posts, but you can look at. Now, I can't even begin to tell you, there's an enormous number of links I have from the old days on work I have done on the science of climatology and in the statistics that people use in it. So first of all, I have some stuff on consensus in science. My favorite is there's a link on there, and I call it best. You'll see it. Consensus in science. I look at all the times there were consensuses in science and how those turned out. If you use time series of any kind, usually these are handled very, very badly, not just in global warming, or climate, but everywhere. And I have a lot of articles. Don't smooth time series. Don't substitute your model over time series. Don't confuse signal and noise. Often the signal is treated as if it is noisy when it is not. The analogy of a television signal that's corrupted by noise is not applicable to the climate. But somehow this engineering mindset has taken over. I have lots and lots of articles on that. I'm not even going to tell you. Another is temperature is actually very badly handled. You probably are aware that the global average temperature is nothing like that. It is actually a model. As such, it is subject to a substantial plus or minus, a predictive plus or minus, not a parametric plus or minus. And those of you who understand statistical models will understand what I mean by that. So the temperature itself and how they homogenize temperature, the best stuff out of Stanford, all that kind of stuff, you need to understand all of that kind of stuff, all of those kind of things, and how temperature itself is really... It's the building block for global warming, but there's massive uncertainty in it. I got stuff on PM 2.5 and dust. I got a few things about, every bad thing is said to be caused by climate change. There's a guy, Numbers Watch, I think it is. He's got a list. You could find that easily enough of everything bad said to happen because of climate change. I don't think he's kept it up for years, but he had thousands of things on this list already by then. And I'm sure there's many, many more since then. Prostitution's going to increase. Victims are all, world ends, victims hardest hit, official victims hardest hit. This is the same thing. I go into the expertocracy, how, rulers pick out certain scientists to make their pets, and these become the most influential experts, and how we have a very difficult time ridding ourselves of them. Just think the fabulous Fauci and the like. I have a whole swath of articles on the models, climate models, always remembering, of course, that all models only say what they're told to say. My favorite of all these is the attack of the black swans from outer space. This is another tale of fantasy. That's the article that got me blocked from him on Twitter many years ago. And then I have some of the bizarre, like the bioengineering humans to combat climate change. Another academic calls for shorter people to battle global warming. Yes, indeed. They want to drug the population, genetically modify them so they're smaller and eat less. This is from New York University. Anyway, just stupidity, left to right, up, down, every which way. People have driven themselves mad by this. We're going to talk about this much more, unfortunately, in the future, but there's a whole list of resources, stuff that I've done that you're free to look up and pass on. Thank you very much.